Well, thank you for staying with us. I'd like to welcome to the stage Paul Maheke, an artist who works with performance, installation and video. We first met way back in 2015 when we were both very new to the city. Yeah. And we invited Paul to develop a project as part of our Moving Up programme, which is with children aged 10 and 11 years old at Gateway Primary School in northwest London. It's an academy school with 3-form entry, which is 90 children a year. I don't think I've ever been to a primary school so big with so many children in it. Through Moving Up, we aim to bring together artists with children in their final year of primary school as they prepare to move to secondary school. In Year 6, children take a SATS test, which divides and labels them for their onward education, contributing to anxiety and mental health problems. The results of SATs form a major component of the primary school league tables and can be read as part of a shift in schooling from the humanist and child-centred philosophies of the 60s and 70s to a culture of competition, standardisation, assessment and future employability today. In 2016, there is a national campaign by parents and carers to stand in opposition to SATs with a kids' strike. Despite this increase in mental health problems, there is far less time for structures of support, care and well-being in schools, as well as a narrowing of arts provision because of the pressures on timetables and changes in relationships between teachers and students that accompany this increased focus on assessment. Through the Moving Up programme, artists have created temporary spaces where children can develop tools to support one another and think about how schools could be better. One outcome of the project is a series of useful and practical toolkits, such as this, the Perfect School Toolkit, which was just printed yesterday, which aims to support conversations between children and teachers and imagine different ways of being together in school. I'm really delighted that you could join us today and to talk a little bit more about trying to do horizontal work in vertical structures.
Mm-hmm. Hi, everyone. Thank you for staying. Just maybe at the start, I wanted to go back to a few things that have been said in the afternoon, and especially from Barbie Ashente, who is here, and Koyokuo, and these ideas of the circle first, and the second, how to use lack, the space of lack as a space of possibility. And that's kind of also a good way to introduce you to my practice that is very much about a sense of interconnectedness and what I try to implement in the project that we've done together with Alex that started back 3 years ago. So my practice is very much informed by the ways in which our identities and subjectivities are formed and constituted, as well as how they manifest in the body and how to look at the body as an archive, for example. But we can talk about it a bit later, but that's ideas that I try to, again, implement in the ways in which I was working with the students.
Yeah, perhaps you can talk a little bit more about that, about how you first started to approach the project and how your practice kind of informed that.
So I've been working with schools and teenagers for a long time now. I graduated 7 years ago from an art school in France, and then arrived to London 3 years ago when I started the project, actually, maybe a month after I arrived. And one of the things that I'm always trying to remember whenever I'm working with students and children is how other children I used, but I only realized that later on, how I used art as a way to escape masculine spaces where I felt not really comfortable. And so art classes in France were mainly led by female teachers, and where the classes were full of girls. And I felt more comfortable in that. And I realized that it was something quite important, and so maybe I should also reflect back on that feeling of not really belonging, and in order to provide a space where discussion could happen, but also another way of engaging with gender, class, and race could happen. So that's very much how I approached the project, and I knew from the very beginning that I wanted to use movement as a way to access that, and yeah, speaking from the body rather than, for example, like voicing out concerns, and that can be also quite difficult, especially around that period of time when you are like 10 to, I don't know, 15-year-old.
Well, yeah, perhaps you could talk a little bit more about that, because you use movement and the body and dance in that project. Maybe you could talk through what you did.
Yeah, so the first thing I've done, as I'm often collaborating with people, was to bring in a filmmaker, Philippe Toulac, and a choreographer, Benny Ord, and the three of us, we devised those exercises that we would lead in the school. And I never been in contact with the British school system, so it was all new to me. And I arrived in this academy, and what struck me at first was like how, first of all, the teachers were really suspicious about artists and about art in general at large, but also how the architecture was so like speaking from a place of power and hierarchy, and how it was really emphasizing like the multiple levels of oppression that the students could be also affected outside of the school. So when we discussed with the teachers, it was clear for me that, because they thought that I would come in, I think with Alex, that we would come in and maybe choreograph a performance for the end of the year show. I don't know, they connected, I can't remember what's the name of this course, PE or something. What is this thing? Like where you basically sing and dance. And I was like, okay, no, this is not going to be like that. And I wanted to introduce also, so the school is located in around the corner of the showroom. And I wanted to bring contemporary dance in the school. So that's why I brought in Benny. Just to confront or to challenge both the teachers and the kids in their understanding of movement and what could be dance and what can be also provided to them, and so what kind of practices would be introduced to them. And so that's like how we started, by very weird exercises, very abstract thinking around the body. And I think at first, even maybe for the Serpentine team, it was a bit like nerve-wracking, because the way I speak about art and the way I devise the exercise are leaving a huge space to experiment, and also not compromising on the level of the quality that I want to bring in, and not assuming that a kid can't understand complex language and complex things in general, because their life is very complex. So yeah, I guess, if it does make sense, should I keep on talking about how we proceeded? And so, but yet I didn't want to be intimidating, so from the beginning, I had this idea of bringing a fiction around the project, and so looking at the school as this island that would be led by the kids themselves, and they have to decide and on this island there is a school only run, but there's no grown-up, only run by the students, and the students are also the teachers. So they have to think about how they will create their school and what would be their school. And so it started with very, very romanticized idea around the island, which was interesting as well, actually, in connection to the history of migration in London, in connection to the Caribbean, for example. But then rapidly we realized, and the teachers first, that there were some real concerns that were emerging from those small exercises of discussion that we created. And one of the things that we really tried to do was to prioritize the students' voices. So you would have like discussion groups, while others would practice movements in the staircases or like in the how do you call that? Like spaces that we never used, like the staircases, the corridors, to disrupt that kind of hierarchy in the building as well.
Yeah, that was something I wanted to ask you about, because I know that you've thought very carefully about that. Perhaps you could describe the building and how you thought about the architecture and spaces.
So yeah, first of all, you arrived and you have to check in, and then there is this hierarchy in the way that so when you arrive at the school and you're young, you start on the ground floor, and then as the years goes, you go up the building, and when you are in year 6, ready to move to secondary school, then you are at the top of the building. And also one of the things that I've realized that the schedule of the students was so packed, they had no time for thinking, no time for doing anything else than being led by someone from one place to another. And so how to invest this architecture differently, like how to occupy this architecture differently, which was actually, I think, a bit challenging for the school, because they didn't really understand at first what we were trying to do. But then when they saw the response of the kids, they started to understand that there was something interesting in looking at this the daily environment of the teachers and the students in a different light. And that was for me like a strategy to open up those kind of spaces for conversation in between the teachers and the students.
Perhaps we could also talk about your influences. And I know that you're very interested in the writings of Bell Hook and Audre Lorde. Would you like to talk about how they informed the project?
Yeah, one of the first things, back in 2015, I'm still interested in this idea of developed by Audre Lorde around this kind of a sense of a mutual survival and a common shared in that survival. And so I wanted to speak from that place and center this idea. So all the little exercise and tasks that we given to the students and the teachers were based on collective tasks, because also I realized that at the school they were pushed to work towards their individual success. And so that's not really an idea that I agree with. And back to this first thing that I said at the beginning of the talk, this idea of the acknowledging interconnectedness is super important for me. And so how to bring that in a conversation with someone who is 10-year-old from very early on. So they had to work together. It was difficult at times, very exhilarating at other times. But yeah, it was definitely something that, again, like challenged a little bit the functioning of the school maybe. And I didn't realize it was kind of to what extent it would challenge that and disrupt the structure established by the school, but it was quite effective actually.
And you've produced this beautiful kit
that we discovered today. So this took 3 years to be made, but it's like a small, it's a small kit that falls apart. And it's going to be distributed in schools across the UK. And so when Alex invited me to do this project and mentioned the fact that the outcome would be this tool, to rethink education, I thought about this game that has to be played between the teachers and the students. So I think it's based on small groups of 6, and you have to have at least 3 grown-ups and 3 kids, and they have to talk about a lot of issues. And to trigger this conversation, they have like those little cue cards that they have to respond to questions by different means. So there is an exercise about drawing, there's an exercise around movement, but the main idea is that conversation. So with very simple question like where is your school located, based on the fiction of this island, and the school of the island being run by students, by the kids. Who are the children attending your school? And through those questions, so we did it during the workshop. And what was interesting, it was actually how acute this connection between how to say that, the world outside the school and the world inside the school, and the tension and how like the teachers were not really aware of that, or not very conscious of that. Okay, sorry, I have to stop now.
Well, maybe we can just finish with the children themselves. And I'm aware that we have some images on here of going around some of the children's drawings, and I think one of them in particular really stood out to you. Do you want to talk about it?
One of the most like maybe poignant moment was when this small girl like told me. So I was asking the students to draw this utopian school, and the school was a village, and everything was revolving around the school, and you could use the school as a shelter whenever there was something bad happening at school, or outside of the school, whether it was at your place with your family or with your friends outside. And I think it was quite interesting to see how, so when I was thinking of the school as this kind of oppressing structure, actually it could become also this, shelter. And maybe it was already a utopian space for that student. I think it was quite interesting.
Absolutely. I'm sorry our conversation was so short today, but thank you for sharing that with us, Paul.
Thanks.